Hi everyone, this is Lorraine. I have been encouraged by a number of people to do this video recording with you today, as so many of you have been a witness and observer to this journey that I have been on for several years in working with my health. What I hope also comes through my sharing today is realizing that there are common threads that we experience with different experiences that feel challenges in our life, that can be in a relationship, dealing with financial struggles, dealing with addictions, dealing with attitude. And so things have a way of playing out in different forms. I've always believed that it'll come out in a form that has the best chance of getting your attention, if that's what's needed, so that you can see something that you have difficulty seeing that might be in the shadows, or something that you're trying to avoid. And it will come in a form that has the best chance of helping you to create a breakthrough that you're truly wanting at the deepest level. Sometimes the form that it takes is rough. And sometimes it has to be that way, because if it's part of your purpose to be able to move through some of those difficult places so that you can be there of help to other people who are going through periods that are also very rough. I see a lot of familiar faces that are joining me today, and I just want to say hello to those of you who have taken the time to want to hear what I'm going to share today. I thought about making some notes, but I'm just going to speak from my heart, as I always do, and I trust that what comes out of my mouth is what is meant to be said. So just to catch some of you up who maybe have not heard me speak before and are not familiar with some of my story, I've been dealing on and off with a breast cancer diagnosis since 2012. And I have had very difficult periods of feeling in tremendous pain and incapacitation that I have rallied very quickly from, and have had, for the most part, an easier experience in the first several years. And it was very eye-opening for me when you're dealing with a health crisis, or, as I said, a relationship or financial crisis. It allows you, it invites you to see things that you might not be able to see any other way. Sometimes we find ourselves in such a battle position that we have to exhaust ourselves almost to become a puddle on the floor, so that you can't fight anymore, so that you can see something that's in plain sight right in front of you, that it's only when you give in, when you surrender, that you can see it. And in that surrender, what's remarkable that I have found time and time again is that the ability to move through those difficult periods are a lot easier than we imagine. But when we're in that fight position, we can't see it. What we see when we go into battle is it becomes very adversarial. Me against whatever it is that I don't want to deal with, and I have to win. And that's part of the consciousness of this planet that supports fighting and being against something or someone, where somebody is wrong and somebody is right. In my journey, I have found that anytime I take that position, it creates more suffering and more resistance and much more pain, because a lot of times the things that we're battling are against ourselves, and nobody can beat us up and make us feel worse than we can. So it really is invitations to look and do things in some new ways. So in June, I invited many people to join me to be like a fly on the wall, as I did a very deep dive. I called it a 21-day God immersion. And during that time, I went very deep and did a lot of automatic writing and reading and engaged in developing a stronger connection with my God self and with my soul. And for the first time, I did videos every single day and allowed people to hear and experience my process. One of the things that was the most exciting during that time is many people felt inspired, and I think it was no coincidence, because I think it was their own inner calling was drawing them inward to do some of those deeper dives for themselves, because we are in such a time of acceleration, and the connections that we have with our soul leading and with our God self is where our greatest power is, where our greatest capacity to move through any circumstance with the power of love, with the power of presence, which is, there's nothing stronger that exists anywhere in any universe or multiverse. And the key is what kind of relationship that you have. So I think that catches you up a little bit. So during this time of doing this 21-day immersion, I had shared that I had been seeing that there was an acceleration in the breast tissue, that it looked as if I was experiencing a flare-up. And I'm a very powerful healer. And I say that with great confidence because of the shifts that I've seen with clients and the remarkable reversals within sometimes just a matter of hours. And it was very frustrating for me, especially from an ego point of, I'm so fucking powerful. Why am I not able to heal myself when I know that I have that capacity? And I didn't have a lot of answers other than to look at how I might be getting in the way of allowing some of the healing energy that I'm now able to transfer at a much higher level. Why is that not getting through, or what is it that I'm not seeing? We get into those places of questioning, what am I doing wrong? Why is this not happening for me? When we start to fall into those fears and doubts. And at that time, I didn't have a lot of answers. The only place that I could go was to go to God. And I remember one day, as I was approaching a point of needing to make a decision as to whether I was going to follow some of the recommendations that my medical team had recommended, which was to do radiation and to do a chemo drug. I was really struggling at that time, and what I had shared in the 21-day group, and I was shocked when I found this come through in my automatic writing, was, will you trust me if I ask you to do something that scares you? And my first thought was, what am I going to be asked to do? And I was asked to postpone doing the radiation, not doing any chemo, which I will address a little bit in just a little while. And I had a resource at my disposal through a very close friend of mine to be able to work with an alternative modality, which is very powerful, which is called Photon light therapy. And it works with a lot of the Nikola Tesla's perspective of working with the different levels of infrared and full spectrum. And it works naturally with the body's ability to come back into harmony and alignment. And that really resonated with me, because I've been a believer all my life of questioning where East and West comes together in a way that's compatible, so that I'm making decisions that are not coming from a place of fear, and ones that feel more resonant, and that I've gotten the information that I need to make an informed decision. And this is a lot of the work that I do with people, is to help them to step out of that place of fear, because we can make a lot of choices when we're in fear that lead to regrets. I've done it. I've looked at some of the things in hindsight and wished that I had slowed down and gotten a little bit more information. But, you know, if I truly believe that everything serves its purpose, I have to make peace with that. I still have some struggles with a few things about that I wish that I had done differently. And that is not to say that it would have brought me to a better place, but it would have brought me to a different place. So I've been I've been working with the photon light therapy and seeing that things were getting worse. I was becoming more symptomatic, a lot of itching, a lot of pain. Things were looking very, very scary. And when I went back to see my oncologist and we had the CT scan, it definitely showed that there was a progression that was moving quite aggressively. But what was fascinating to them was the fact that whatever was happening was completely contained, as if it had a circle around it and was being held from moving anywhere else in my body. I'm going to take some credit for that, for my own power and for my non-physical team of helping it to be contained during this time as other things were lining up that I didn't see. And again, I want to just remind you that this, when you're looking at any challenge in your life, and it can feel as if you're stuck in a situation where you don't feel that there are many options, or you want to get away from that situation as quickly as possible, because that's very common. I don't like where I'm at. I hate where I'm at. It scares the hell out of me. What is the fastest thing that I can do to get rid of it so that I can feel free? And when we try to do things like that, from my experience, all we do is create more and more suffering, because we're not really dealing with the situation. We're just trying to push it aside. And I think that's one of the reasons why many people are still dealing with a lot of things that they haven't cleared, because they haven't really faced it head on and haven't had the tools and resources to know how to move through it from a place of power rather than from a place of fear. And I think that we're learning how to do that. So when I went back to see my oncologist after the CT scan, and it was recommended that I see the radiation oncologist to see whether a mastectomy was an option. And one of my very dear friends had said to me a couple of weeks ago, she asked me if I would be willing to be open to consider any request, any option, whether I did it or not, because I needed to look at my position of refusal to be open to certain things. And that's something that's very interesting about when we take a stand with things, is when we put blinders on whether we decide to follow a particular path or not. But when we stand in absolute refusal, we're cutting ourselves off from options that can be revealed, because we won't even go there. So I gave myself permission to consider every option that was recommended to me, and that I was going to bring it inside and see what felt right, and I was going to trust that. And I'm grateful that I can do that, because I've been building that muscle for a very, very long time. That's not to say that my ego does not go bonkers and get really, really terrified, especially when you're dealing with your mortal life or your livelihood or your safety. Those are the things that really bring us to the brink of doing things that sometimes we do out of desperation. Been there many times. So when I saw my oncologist and we looked at what was going on, she was hesitant as to whether mastectomy would work and suggested that I see a surgeon. And while this was going on, I had to really ask myself some questions, and that is, what kind of quality of life do I want for myself? I know that my sense of freedom and mobility is very important. I also felt very, very clearly, and heard this from a number of absolutely true. And the question was, where do I go from here? So after seeing the surgeon and hearing her comments, which put the idea of a mastectomy off the table, it came back to that their only solution was to do chemo. And one of the questions that I found myself when I was sitting in conversation with God, and I will also tell you that while I've been going through this period of a lot of physical symptoms, I have felt some difficulty making that connection, because when you're not feeling well or when you're feeling scared, that can take the forefront of being able to really move into a clear space, to be able to hear the voice of your heart. So that's something I've also been working with, is how do I come to that place of peace when I don't feel at peace at all? And for somebody to say to me, you need to just relax and trust that everything's happening for a purpose. Things that I tell people, I just want to smack you. Because when you're in that kind of a place, that can feel as if, why don't you just tell me how to get to Mars? Because in that intensity, it can feel very elusive to try to get to a clear space. And I endeavored and did the best I could. So I remember one of the things that I said to God was, if I go into this meeting and they tell me that the only option is chemo, and I look at that and I really sit with whether that's something I can do energetically for my body and let that guidance lead. If I can't do that, meaning if I know in my heart without a shadow of a doubt that that is not my path, what will I do? What will happen to me? And that was terrifying. And I remember saying to God, I don't know if I have the courage, I don't know if I have the strength to go forward if I find myself in a situation where that is the only option. And I could understand in such a deep way why people, when they're in extreme states, why they will do anything or consider things that they would never consider before, because they feel desperate, because they feel scared. Because I felt all of that. It was like, I will do whatever they want me to do so that I can feel better, because I can't live like this. Very eye-opening when you get to that brink. And I brought a friend of mine because I didn't want to go to that meeting, and I wanted to be able to hear things very clearly. And I came home and I brought that into prayer, and I really sat with it. And I looked at and asked myself, what is the truth in this situation? And the conclusion that I came to, because there was no other conclusion, was that in the short term for me, and this is not true for everybody because every body is different, and everybody is different. People respond to different things. Where my energies are at this point in time, where the energies are of the drugs that they recommended, the message that I got was, in the short term it might help, but in the long term it would be so devastating for my health, and my ability to function in this world would be a very dear cost. I can't explain to you why I know that. I know that is absolutely true. And it wasn't that I was resistant because I didn't want to do the chemo. I just knew that it would cost me so dearly that it was not something that I could do. And so I came home and I had my conversation with God, and I've been working with my non-physical team round the clock, and I have added some additional beings that are helping, especially when I work with people, I will often bring them into the Temple of Atlantis, which does exist, where my priestess self will work with that team in addition to the non-physical team that I work with. It feels sometimes like I'm talking about a lot of teams, but it's just all one team. But this presence of this prior self is really a force to be reckoned with. And so what I realized that I needed to do was I needed to put myself completely in God's hands, in my soul's hands, and turn everything over. And there's something else that I want to share with you that I think is really important. When I wake up in the middle of the night, which seems to be when my symptoms are the most intense, it's when the veil between worlds are the thinnest. It's often where the wee hours are the times when health and healing is happening, where there's a lot of detoxing, and it's the most restorative. It's also, for me, the most intense periods of when I happen to be awake. And I had the sense that some of what I needed to do was to move into as much relaxation and resistance. Really move the resistance aside and do everything that I could think of doing in order to work with the symptoms without going into battle, because that battle energy, that victim energy, was right on the periphery. And I sat and I said, how am I supposed to be in this situation? What should I be thinking? What should I be saying? How can I best move through this experience when I feel the height of symptoms, so that I am not getting in the way? Because what I was told was it was my fears that was blocking this rush of healing energy that was trying to come through. Some of it was coming through, but it was my fears. The kind of fears that we have is fears of recurrence. And of course we have recurrence because life brings us experiences. People have relapses. We can move in and out of different phases of depression if you're dealing with depression. If you have different challenges in life, they come back. So the idea of a recurrence is really not so unusual, because life will continue to bring us opportunities to practice things that can look as if we're having a recurrence. And when you're dealing with a health situation, that's one of the fears that comes up for people, because it has some of the indications and the energies of some post-traumatic stress. When there's a lot of intensity that you're experiencing, it leaves a mark on our spirit of, please God, I don't want to ever go through something like this again. And so there's a part that's kind of stands in a state of hypervigilance, waiting for that shoe to drop and fearful that that shoe will drop. I know I have felt that. I don't dwell in it, but I know it's in the back of my mind. And so there's my ego coming up with all of these things. What is going to happen if it gets worse? You didn't do the chemo. What are you going to do? What if you become incapacitated? How are you going to take care of yourself? Blah, blah, blah. All these things were going on, and I'm thinking, how can I best work with this and also stand in my power and continue to empower my soul to take the lead? Because when I know, and this is true for all of us, when you're standing strongly in your soul power, when you can feel the strength of your soul's ability to see way beyond anything that your human self can see, because the human self sees things from a very narrow lens and typically will see things as problems and overwhelming situations and doom and gloom, whereas the soul never sees anything. It sees things from a vista, a horizon of possibilities. It sees solutions as the God self does. And that's the part that I have been empowering every single day. So I had a conversation with my friend Jessie Ann Nichols George following day, and I said, here's where I'm at, and I'd love to hear your thoughts about, in that situation, how I can begin to shift out of that fear spiral and move back into my place of power when I'm in the throes of that intensity. And I'll tell you something that's very interesting. It's not that complicated. What I found myself saying at that point in time was, what kind of a stand do I want to take for myself? What kind of a future do I want to create for myself without any attachment to any outcome? And essentially what I said was, my cancer story has served me well. I am so grateful for everything that I have experienced as a result of it. It has taken me farther in my own evolution, my personal growth, in opening up my gifts in ways that have been off the charts. So there have been tremendous blessings that have come along the way, while there has been a lot of roughness. Both have been a part of it. And so I have essentially really taken a strong stand and saying, I refuse, not from a battle position, I refuse to die from breast cancer. That's not my life plan. I know that. And so I'm claiming that. I'm not saying that from anger. I'm not saying that from, I'm ready to fight you on this. I'm not in any fight whatsoever. I have just essentially said to my human self, I'm not going this way. Whatever it is that you imagine will happen is not going to happen. I'm not feeding that. This is the chapter. You have served me well. I thank you. This chapter is closed, and I am now moving into a new direction. And I am focusing all of my energies on that new direction. So I'm not getting into a debate with my human self. And the more that I have reiterated and made that claim, and working with all of my tools during the course of the day, with meditations, working with some of the Joe Dispenza information. I have the Photon Genie, which is a phenomenal modality at my disposal that I use every day, that brings nitric oxygen into my body. I can see the difference of how I'm feeling. There's no resistance. I really hope that this is perhaps giving you some hope with some of the things that you're struggling with, that there are options. And then here's some of the icing on the cake that I had to stand back and I had to just really just go, whoa. So years ago, I had the opportunity to connect with a group here in Pennsylvania called Unite for Her. And it is spearheaded by a woman who went through her own cancer diagnosis very successfully with the use of alternative therapies. During the course of the year, she raises money through her nonprofit and affiliates with many different hospitals and centers to raise money and have wellness days for women dealing with breast cancer. And during those wellness days, there are breakout sessions of being able to hear about yoga and of massage, including Reiki, as well as acupuncture. And you walk out of these days with a passport, which is actually a voucher for 12 complementary therapies from providers who have been vetted in those areas to support you in your own healing process, whatever that is, whether you go the traditional route or whether you do a combination, that you have that support without it being out of pocket. That's pretty amazing. I have gotten this grant 8 times. And with the diagnosis that comes from any progression, I actually have access to this beautiful gift twice a year, so I get 24 sessions. And I'm telling you this for a reason, because it's really very cool. So I'm sitting here and I'm working with the energy, and I'm doing sessions with myself, and I'm doing individual client sessions, and just watching all this incredible stuff happening while I'm having all of these symptoms that are not consistent during the course of the day. And I'm also working with the power of my mind and seeing how, when I move into different states, how the intensity of my symptoms diminish. It's really pretty cool when you find out how powerful you really, really are. And sometimes it takes getting to this intense state of, as I said, being brought to the brink where you can open to see things and experience things and hear things that you couldn't hear or see or do at any other time, because you're too accustomed to living a certain way, or too resistant, or too in the way, or too whatever. So I keep everybody that I work with in the loop, because if you're going to be working with a team, you keep everybody appraised. So I was having a conversation with my acupuncturist, whose husband is going through the final days of his life. And she said to me, since you're not doing chemo, I have an option for you. And I said, what is it? And she said, my business partner has been trained by my teacher with 30 years experience of working with Chinese medicine. And I heard ding, 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 ding. And I thought, beautiful. Because Chinese medicine is very, very powerful, and it works so beautifully as a combination with East and West, and it works with the brilliance and the harmonizing of the body. And what's equally brilliant about this is the fact that my own acupuncturist will now be a consultant to her business partner. They're like 10 minutes from my house. So this new woman I'm going to be working with is very, very skillful in working with Chinese herbs as well as acupuncture. I feel so good about this. I feel that this has been laid in place years in advance. I mean, I took a step back and I just said to God, you are so fucking brilliant the way that you lined this up. Who knew years later that I might find myself at this place for my final breakthrough, where whatever this is. This feels very, very pivotal for me, that I have been brought back to this place again and again through a series of recurrences to take back my power in a way that I never have. I know there's a purpose to that. That may not make sense to you, but it makes sense to me. So yesterday, I had my meeting with this acupuncturist, very, very sweet. Gave her all the information. She then had a consultation with my other acupuncturist. I know it can get a little confusing with my talking about two different acupuncturists. And so last night she called in a formula, a beginning formula, which is foundational, which resonates with me because when I'm working with people, I'm always talking about building your internal foundation. Because if you have something strong to stand on, then as you weather life's storms, if you want to call it that way, that you have something that can help you to steady yourself so that you can move through these periods without being tossed around. And of course, you know, there are components with that, the people that you surround yourself with, the community of support. We don't do these things by ourselves, and I'm very, very blessed with the support that I have physically and also non-physically. So last night she called in the prescription. I should have that in a couple of days. Everything about this feels very right. I am not looking at this to be the solution to my problems. I feel this is an excellent addition to this next phase of my own recovery, whatever that looks like. I feel a door has opened through my willingness to take a stand for myself. I know that my oncologists don't understand, and they were not pushy. I know they want the best for me. There's a part of me that wants to go back in a month and for there to be enough of a shift so that I can say, see, I was right. I'm going to own that and let that go. I feel so loved and supported by the universe and by God that I'm being guided in the right direction, and I can see that the way in which I'm navigating this next phase is applicable to every aspect of my life. How I make choices. Am I coming from a place of fear? Am I coming from a place of faith and trust? And of course, my human self wants all these guarantees, and I can just sense my soul smiling and saying, yeah, okay, sure, fine. And it's also so important to recognize all the different ways that the blessings show up, because they are, not that they're guarantees, but they're the indicators that your prayers have been heard, things are lining up for you, that you are still needed, that you are meant to get through this, whatever that looks like. You know, when I tell my human self everything is going to be okay, I don't know what that means. What I know is that I have at this moment everything that I need to navigate today. In this moment, I am okay, and whatever the divine plan is, my intention is to stay in as much alignment with that as possible. So that's kind of where I'm at. I don't know where any of this is going. I am definitely focusing on a future that is much brighter. I'm putting myself in the hands of my soul every day, in the hands of God every single day. And I know that I am in the best hands as I move through these next phases. And I'm just watching how the energy in my body just keeps getting boosted. That's what's really wild about this. If I didn't have what was going on in my breast, I've never felt stronger than ever. The energy that I'm transmitting, maybe you're feeling this coming across as I'm talking, because it is just pouring through me, this incredible frequency that I hands, whatever it is that you're going through. What I want to leave you with is your mind can only see, your soul sees way beyond anything that you can imagine. And these are times where we are being called to stretch, to jump into that abyss, to not know where we're going to land. And the only way that you can truly find out, and I'll say this for myself, I have learned so much about my own capacity by being true to myself, by standing in integrity, not from a place of resistance or trying to be stubborn or strong, but really tuning in and letting my soul guide and lead. And every time that I do, it never leads me in the wrong direction. It never leads me into more difficulty, although I will tell you that sometimes in order to get to the other side of things, it can feel very rough for a while. And you find out what you're capable of. And those are times that it's so important to build in self-care and to have a self-care community. We need to have both. So, I don't know if there's anything else that I feel guided to say right now. I'm going to stop for a moment. I see so many people joining me, and I just love that you've taken the time. I hope that you've gotten some takeaways from things that I've said. And if you have any questions and you want to post them, you can go ahead and do that. I'm just kind of looking through. I'm so curious. And I'm also looking at ways to be having more fun. I went and I saw Downton Abbey on Tuesday, and it was a lot of fun. I am looking at bringing as much normalcy back into my life, and I have decided that I am going to let my soul continue to lead and reaffirm that every single day. So, I love you all, and I think I'm going to stop there. If you have any questions, you can feel free to post them underneath the video. If what I have shared with you resonates, I encourage you to share that with other people. These are the most powerful times that we've ever been in. These are the times when we need to be doing this inner clearing, where we need to be standing in our own sovereignty and self-authority and looking at where are we giving our power away to other people that we think know better than we do. When do we bring in that support, and when do we need to start to trust ourselves and let go of those doubts and yes, even walk through some of these experiences shaking, not having any idea where you're going to land, but trusting enough. How do we build trust? Practice. We don't just trust things. I have seen so many blessings that have come in my life, and that's where I go to, are those blessings. And sometimes when you can get out of the way, and getting out of the way can just be, that's not my story anymore. I'm not living that story anymore. That's my old story that is complete. I am now creating a new future. I'm moving in a new direction. And every choice that you make and the actions that you take are reflective and demonstrated that new direction. So there's no battle, there's no fight, there's no nothing. The more that you demonstrate that new direction, the more I believe the ego starts to get on board with that, because it starts to calm down. And it's just that small self, that part that's just looking to say, are we going to be okay? And the answer is that as mortal beings, whether we remain in a physical form or not, we never die. We will always be okay. And it's up to us as to how through those choices, we either create ease or grace or suffering or misery. And whatever your journey looks like, please be loving and gentle with yourself. You're doing the very best that you can. And if you know that you need some help, get it. Get it. We're not meant to walk some of these difficult places by ourselves. And you deserve it. So I love you all. I'm going to have a little bit of lunch. And who knows, I might be doing another video in the near future. I'll keep you apprised of how things are going if you'd like to hear more from me. And I hope that this has touched you in some way and that you have something that has resonated with you that was meaningful for you. I trust that. So I'm going to end here. Interestingly enough, it's a new moon, so it's a fantastic day to really stand in your power and let this be the beginning of your next story. So lots of love to you all, and I'll see you soon. Take care. Be well.